There's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very, very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. My friends, I cannot take it anymore. I'm tired of the bull crap, and, I get to a point where I just can't take it anymore, and I think that my head is going to explode, and every time it does, I don't have a single piece of shred of duct tape anywhere around me. But I have come to the point where I just can't stand the lies anymore. And they are all around us. Honestly, there's not a single, I shouldn't say there isn't a single thing in the media that you can trust, but most of it is total bullcrap. And, if there was a theme for today's show, it'll be that the reason that the left has such a problem, why they can't get their message through, why nobody agrees with them, is the facts do not agree with their ideological agenda. And it's all over the place, my friends. Everything from Washington, D.C. here to Wyoming. Agent 29, play cut number 2.
This past session, a majority of the House voted to not support rural health care, to not support mental health, to not support adult protective services, to not support the elderly, and to not support hungry kids.
Oh, yeah. Enough of that crap. Stop. Can't take it. The reason why the House voted not to do all of those things is none of that is the role of government. And I'm going to get to dumb a lot here in today's program. But the point is that all of the things that he just mentioned are not, I repeat, are not the role of government.
Not only are they not the role of government, we care too much about those things to turn them over to the slipshod efforts that are put out there, for example, in the public schools, federally, in the post office. If you want something done wrong, just give it to the government. But that's more of that shirking responsibility, because we as individuals don't want to do what it takes to take care of people. We just shove it off on them.
Exactly. Rural health care. And I agree. That's important. We live in Wyoming, and most of our hospitals could be considered rural hospitals. But explain to me why that is the role of government. Explain to me why taxpayers should be on the hook for your hospital. Nowhere is that listed in the U.S. Constitution. Nowhere is that listed in the Wyoming Constitution.
He goes on to talk, and we'll get there in a minute, but he goes on to talk about the pioneers of Wyoming.
Oh, yeah.
We're Wyoming. Okay, my family is as pioneer as they get, both on the white side and on the indigenous side as well. Who knows how long they've been here. When they came to Wyoming, they knew there wasn't a clinic a block away to deliver the babies. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was born in South Dakota because his mother had to go back there where there was somebody to help. I'm not saying that we go back to that, but it is not the role of government. And we choose to live here because of the way it is, not the way that they dream it would be. Sorry, I can't stand this anymore either.
Oh, you just wait. That was the short soundbite. I've got one that's like 3 minutes long that, I mean, during the break, you're going to have to go find me some duct tape because, I mean, this is going to get bad. But my friends, it's not just dumb over in what is that? House District 2? Yeah, I knew. It's not just J.D. Williams. It's all over the place. And let's begin with this quote unquote Maryland man. He is not a Maryland man, my friends. Of course, I'm referring to the illegal alien Garcia that was deported to El Salvador, rightfully so, by the way. But the left is trying to craft this narrative that he's just a dad. I mean, he is just a kind gentleman that lives in Maryland, and how dare you deport him? Well, so he is perhaps a dad, but let me give you some other dads throughout history that we could make the same argument about. How about Kim Il-sung? Yeah, he was the dad of the North Korean dictator, Kim Jong-il. Oh, and by the way, the original Kim Il-sung was the dictator himself, and his son, Kim Jong-il, he's kind of a dictator too. But I'm sure he's a dad, and I'm sure he's wonderfully nice to his kids. How about Mao Zedong? I'm sure he knocked up a whole bunch of people during his reign. Or Fidel Castro. Yep, I'm sure he had a bunch of children. Benito Mussolini. Probably probably all dads. But that doesn't say anything about who they are. I'm sure that they were just absolutely fantastic to their kids, although they probably trained them to be dictators. So there's that. But that doesn't say anything about this idiot in Maryland. From the Federalist. An article entitled "The Maryland Man Hoax is Designed to Criminalize Immigration Enforcement." And I quote, "By convincing Americans illegal aliens are indistinguishable from citizens, the left is hoping to delegitimize any attempt to enforce our immigration laws while making Americans feel morally conflicted about their right to do so. The propaganda press's latest manufactured sob story isn't just another hit piece targeting President Donald Trump. It's part of a manufactured strategic campaign to guilt Americans out of supporting immigration enforcement and delegitimize the very concept of national borders. Last month, the Trump administration deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an MS-13 gangbanger and illegal alien, to a prison in El Salvador. Abrego Garcia crossed the border illegally in 2011. So the very first thing he did was break America's laws. By definition, that makes him not a Maryland man. Well, anyway, he was detained in March of 2019. He was charged with removability and was later denied bond when an immigration judge concluded, and I want everybody on Wyoming social media to hear this phrase loud and clear, because I have absolutely had enough of the liberal sob stories of, oh, this guy is just, he is just a dad. No, he was not a gangbanger. Listen to this. An immigration judge concluded that, quote, evidence show that Abrego Garcia is a verified member of MS-13 and found that he failed to prove that, quote, that his release from custody would not pose a danger to others. As explained by Will Chamberlain, senior counsel with the Article 3 Project, Abrego filed an asylum claim 6 months later. In return, a judge ruled Abrego Garcia could not be deported to El Salvador. As Chamberlain explained, any third country would be sufficient. So the point here is that a U.S. judge rules that he is indeed a member of, or finds, not rules, I guess fines is a better word, that he is indeed a member of MS-13, a violent street gang. And violent probably doesn't even describe it. Their one of their mottos is rape, torture, kill. So that tells you how nice of a dad this guy is. So what happens is then another judge says, "Oh no, he can't be deported." Now the trouble is that the judge that ruled that he cannot be deported to El Salvador is relying on their own liberal ideology. When if you remove that from the equation, all evidence points to this guy having absolutely no right whatsoever to stay in the United States. But instead, because the judge is relying on their own political ideology, this criminal is allowed to stay here. Let me just give you another one here from the DHS. And actually, before we go there, play cut number 1.
What then does that leave his status? It seems it would be his status will remain in El Salvador.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that this illegal alien is exactly where he belongs, home in El Salvador.
He is home.
He was in our country illegally. He's from El Salvador, was born in El Salvador. And oh, the media forgot to mention he is an MS-13 gang member. The media would love for you to believe that this is a media darling, that he's just some Maryland father. Well, Osama bin Laden was also a father, and yet he wasn't a good guy. And they actually are both terrorists. He should be in this El Salvador prison for terrorists, and I hope he will remain there. And good on President Bukele.
But it doesn't stop there, my friends. From Breitbart News, deported MS-13 member Kilmar Abrego Garcia was arrested with, quote, rolls of cash and drugs. Now, just for a moment, let's talk about the rolls of cash. If you are stopped or arrested just about anywhere and you have rolls of cash and drugs on you, what happens? You're probably given a very quick lift to the most convenient detention facility known as the county jail. That you usually get arrested, and most of the time, your drugs and cash are used as evidence against you in a court of law, where you're prosecuted, and then you're given your sentence. Now, Abrego Garcia was absolutely arrested with rolls of drugs or rolls of cash and drugs. More evidence that maybe, just maybe, he's not exactly following the laws as a Maryland man would. From Breitbart, and I quote, the deported El Salvadoran migrant, now being defended by Democrats, was arrested with rolls of cash and drugs, according to the Department of Homeland Security, backing up prior court findings that he is a member of the violent gang MS-13. Shooting back at left-wing sympathy for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the 29-year-old illegal migrant, alien, by the way, who was arrested and deported back to El Salvador from Maryland in March, DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said that evidence points to him being part of the gang. Quote, I think this illegal alien is exactly where he belongs, home in El Salvador. So I absolutely agree with all the leftists saying that we need to bring him home. We need to send him home. That's right. Home to El Salvador, my friends. And this is, again, now, I just went through that pretty quick, and I'm pretty fired up this morning because it seems that everywhere I looked, I'm dealing with bull crap from the media. But everything you're hearing about this guy just being a Maryland man, and he's just a nice dad, and how dare you prosecute him and deport him to El Salvador? Well, he's not just a Maryland man. He's a criminal gangbanger. That's who he is. But it doesn't stop there. That's just the cause celeb for the liberals right now. I mean, it's I suppose you look at his picture and he looks kind of sympathetic, but he's certainly not. I'm sure that there are a lot of criminals in America that we prosecuted that have, a pretty sympathetic guy that look pretty good. That's probably one of the reasons why they're a successful criminal, is they can get away with it. But my point here, my friends, is that the reason why liberals have such a hard time is that the facts do not align with their political ideology. Let's see here. How are we doing break-wise? You know what? Let's go ahead and take our first break. And when we come back, I'm going to dig into why exactly liberals have such a hard time. I mean, it's that, I'll just let Ronald Reagan say it when we come back. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland, France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I'm stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to continue to expand. That's true. You can't even stop this program. You can listen to it on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and pretty much everywhere. And it's also on X. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. Well, now, the problem with liberals, my friends, is, well, you know what? I think it's time for a little Ronaldus Magnus.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything. Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Right on, right on. Ronald Reagan hitting the nail on the head again. But he's absolutely right. The problem with liberals is that they know so many things that absolutely aren't true. And, you know, it is so hard now to figure out what is true and what is not true. We began the program with Dum Williams from House District 2 saying, you know, complaining about how the legislature didn't address all of those issues that he brought up. Well, the reason why is none of those are the role of government. And while I sympathize with your belief that you should have free health care and that you should have mental health for all of your children's ailings, the truth is all of that is your job. That is not my job. It is not Agent 29's job or anybody else's. Personal, with liberty and freedom comes personal responsibility. And, you know, none of those things that he mentioned, healthcare, mental health, buying your kid diapers, whatever, doesn't matter. That's not the role of government. And it's not my job as a taxpayer to pay for it.
That's kind of an ideological truth. You know, fundamentally, one side of the House sees government and what its responsibilities are in one way, another side sees it the other way. And they keep talking about these committee bills, how many committee bills we trashed.
Oh, we're going to get there.
Yeah,
we're going there.
It is so frustrating to get the message through. And in his talk, JD actually went there, but they never go far enough with truth. They might tap on the truth and then they immediately swerve.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a snake in the garden.
Trust in me. Oh, wait, that's Slithers. The point is that, and you're exactly right, Ken, that liberals use a grain of truth, just enough to get you to agree with them, and then they take it in an entirely different direction. And it's because the facts do not line up with their belief systems. And I've got a whole bunch of examples here. Let's see here. Well, I mean, let's just go to global warming, for example. Now, when I was growing up, it started out global warming. And then we realized that that was a bunch of bull crap, and it turned into global cooling. And now we've gone through several different iterations, and now it's just climate change.
When I was growing up, it was, we're going to be frozen.
Yeah.
Ice age is impending.
Yeah, exactly right.
So it cycles.
Yeah. And so the truth is that the climate does change, but it's over thousands of years. You can look through the geologic record and you can see that, yes, indeed, the climate in just about everywhere did change over time, but not in the time frame that liberals want you to believe. So, for example, if you drive south out of Sheridan, go through Buffalo, go out into the Red Hills, you can dig into the side of pretty much any shale hill, and you will find fossils of all sorts of sea creatures. You can drive up Highway 16 out of Buffalo and pull off the side of the road, and there's a whole hillside where you can reach down in the dirt and you'll have a whole handful of little seashells. Now, why is that? Well, it's because this entire area was an ocean at one time. Well, it's not anymore. It's a high plains desert. How does that happen? Well, I mean, the world changes, but it doesn't change year over year or every 10 years or 20 years. We're talking thousands of years. So while the liberal claim about climate change is technically true, what they do is they twist the truth to fit their own narrative, and that is to force you to buy electric cars and change the light bulbs from incandescent to LED, which, by the way, I think that's probably a good thing, or that you have to replace your gas stove with an electric piece of garbage and every other electric piece in your house. And it's all an agenda, and it has nothing to do with the environment. And that's the other thing that you have to understand about liberals. Really, what they're after is rarely anything that they're actually talking about. And, I mean, there's a good reason for this. And a piece in The Blaze this morning lays it out perfectly. And it's entitled, let's see if I can get that on the screen. Yeah, there we go. It's entitled, Neoliberalism Implodes in a Crisis of Truth and Trust. And let me just quote the first couple paragraphs here, and then we'll talk about it. Quote, "This isn't a culture war. It's an epistemological meltdown when people stop trusting doctors, teachers, and judges, and society will change. Then that change is coming fast." And here's the thing. You might think that all of these segments of our society are disconnected, that the judiciary is disconnected from your kid's science book, and your kid's science book is disconnected from all of the social, quote unquote, social studies that they're being taught in schools. And you're led to believe that they don't all have anything to do with each other, when the truth is they're all connected, and all of it boils down to truth. And that is that there is one truth. You don't get to change it. It is not malleable. It is not changeable. The truth just is. But the problem is the facts and truth don't line up with the liberal agenda. Continuing with the article. This project has reached its apex, and that is the destruction of truth, in today's managerial neoliberal regime, where secular humanism serves as the ruling creed and experts housed in supposedly impartial institutions are tasked with determining truth. And that is, again, their belief that truth is malleable. Let me just give you a great example. So if I can convince you that men can become women and women can become men, or that both of them can become some other fanciful gender as non-binary or whatever, all of that, if I can convince you of those facts, that stands in opposition to everything that you were taught growing up. And that is that every person somewhere has a mommy and has a daddy. Every single person on the face of the planet has a mother. And every single person on the face of the planet has maybe not a father in the definition that I or Agent 29 would use, but there is a male counterpart to that egg that was fertilized. That is an immutable biologic fact, and you can't get away with it. But if I can convince you that somehow, somewhere in the ether, that a change happened in our biology, that now men can become women and women can become giraffes, well, then I can convince you of absolutely anything. The truth is blown wide open, my friends. And I mean, once I'm past that Rubicon, I can convince you of anything I want to.
That's a familiar theme. I mean, who is it that's opposed to truth?
liberals.
You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Absolutely. Exactly right. And, it's interesting. And I don't want to get on this soapbox too far because I want to continue and hit Dum Dum over the head with a brick like he deserves. Just joking. Sorry, I'm a little fired up today. Anyway, but, all of these articles tend to start cropping up around deeply religious holidays. We're in Holy Week right now. And I've got another piece here in the stack of stuff, how, the left is, and the New York Times is intentionally distorting facts that are in the Bible. Why did Jesus ride into Jerusalem? Why did Jesus come at all? Was it to overthrow the Romans? No, that's what some of his disciples believe, but that's not the real reason. But there's an article published in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, where that's the claim. But all of these pieces come up around religious holidays. And the reason for it is if I can convince you that what you are learning in the church pew, and honestly, I'll admit that it depends a lot on which church pew you're sitting in, because some of them are filling you full of bull crap. But if the left can convince you that what you've learned in the church is not true, again, they can convince you of anything. Now, here's a great quotation from this piece. Quote, "In the liberal order, the collapse of institutional credibility marks a crisis of truth. And so far, the only answer from the ruling class has been to scream at you, 'Shut up.' And that is the only response they have, to shut you down, to censor you, to stop you from talking." Now, think about all the censorship that's been going on that went on the last 4 years. The Hunter Biden laptop comes out, and it is demonstrably true that thing exists. All the files that are on it, yep. I mean, it's Hunter Biden doing crack and snorting coke off the backs of hookers. That is a fact, my friends. But the media and the liberal establishment had to try to convince you that, no, these aren't the droids you're looking for. This isn't true at all. In fact, that's just all made up. It's Russian propaganda. Now, the reason they do that is so that they can exact their agenda on you. All right. So you know what? We're a little bit early from our second break, but let's go ahead and take it, because this next piece, if my head stays intact, we'll get through it. But somebody's got to respond to this idiot over in House District 2. And I think that I'm just the guy to do it. I've been waiting for this guy. More in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. the first time I met this guy coming up, J.D. Dum Dum Williams, I was in the legislature. And Poison Barry Crago, who at the time was my representative, unfortunately, came up, brought him up, and tried to introduce him. And J.D. Williams held out his hand. He goes, I've been wanting to meet you. And I said, oh, okay, well, thanks. Very nice to meet you. That was very cordial. And he says, I think I'd like to be on your program. And my response was, no, I don't think you would. I said, but you're welcome to if you'd like. And needless to say, he didn't take me up on my invitation. Wise choice on his part, because I don't think that he would have had that much fun. And, you know, Dum Dum Williams is one of those people that, you know, you always hear that the dog's bark is worse than its bite. Well, I don't even think that J.D. Williams is a dog. I think it's more of a loud, shrill shriek from his pasture. And he sounds like he's credible. And in his videos, yeah, I can see why they're persuasive. But when he gets to the floor, he is as meek as a mouse. The only problem is that he's a mouse that is very, very devious. Now, he put out another video yesterday talking about all the committee bills and the ideological shift in the legislature. And I don't know. And you know what, Agent 29, you better take this pistol away from me. I may shoot through the ceiling. I don't know. I'm this guy. I cannot stand it. Go ahead and play Dum Dum.
From House District 2 here. Some of you have been asking about the Management Council meeting that was on April 8th. So let's talk a couple minutes about that. This meeting is where legislative leadership from both the House and the Senate meet with committee chairmen and prioritize interim topics. A couple of changes this year are, number one, that committee chairs will have more latitude when prioritizing interim topics. And number two, the interim committee meeting days have been cut from 6 to 4.
Okay. All right. So let's stop right there. Go ahead, Agent 29. I know you're just chomping at the bit for this one.
If you're hearing some noise in the background, what you can't see is that JD has costumed himself as a rancher. No doubt it's his hat, it's his bandana and all that. Obviously trying to make an immediate impression. I'm Wyoming.
Yeah.
I'm a cowboy. Okay.
All right. So now let's just before we get back to him, let's just talk about what the Management Council decisions were. Indeed, they did reduce the amount of days from 6 to 4, which I think that there are pluses and minuses to that. One of the problems, and if you listened to the podcast yesterday, I hammered the Management Council committee on, you know, it was just one topic, but one of their decisions was, yeah, they're not going to really do anything about the LSO stuffing your emails into the spam folder. And we talked about this yesterday on the live program too. But the other thing is they reduced the amount of committee days from 6 to 4. Here's the problem with that. That is the most convenient place for the public to have interaction with their legislators, because those committee meetings are, you know, they're kind of moved all around the state. So the likelihood that you can go and testify in front of them is pretty high. Now, I also think that that's kind of a bad thing, because, you know, the idea of a committee bill is it's a subject that you can work on. Well, all right. So the first meeting, you talk about it, right? You figure out, you got experts in there, people from agencies, and you figure out what the heck this bill is going to do, what you want to do, if you need a bill, all of that. And then typically the second meeting, you start crafting the bill. And, you know, I've been to a lot of these interim committee meetings. And so I can tell you, this is usually the process. So start crafting the bill. You work it a little bit, amendments here, amendments there, change the bill, add some things, take some things away. And then the third meeting is when you approve the bill. So the problem is that when you reduce it from 6 days down to 4 days, now you have to prep the bill, work it, and approve the bill all in 4 days. And I think if the point is to craft better legislation, and I'm not saying that more time creates better legislation. What I'm saying is, generally speaking, if you have a complex topic and you have more time to go through it, then you should, in theory, come out with a better product in the end. And I'm going to get to that in just a second, but go ahead.
Yeah, they kind of advocated for still having 3 meetings, but cutting the last 2 down to 1 day each, which is feasible. But what you're going to see is just like we've seen with everything else. It used to be we would lose every vote 36-26.
Yeah.
And now it's flipped. And you're going to see them doing the same things to our committee bills than they did. And that's the way it works because their ideology is different. And so all of the things that they complain about now, we can complain about and vice versa, just depending on who's in control. And that's part of what bothers me about JD's talk is he only takes it so far. And we've got to that, the snake in the garden.
Yeah. I mean, and he's only giving you about half the story. And so, it is a fallacy to think that the longer you work on something, the better it's going to be. I mean, for most people, a carpenter, for example, Agent 29, you're a carpenter. So the more time you have to work on a project, in theory, the better end result you're going to have. If you rush something, well, you're going to have mistakes and you're going to be putting nails through the side of cabinets. And I mean, all sorts of things can happen. And this theory that everything that a committee puts out is of good quality is a load of bullcrap. One of the reasons why a lot of committee bills died last year, and this session, by the way, is that they were crap. I mean, just because a committee puts out a bill doesn't mean that you should pass it. If it's a good quality bill, sure. But the problem is a lot of their work wasn't of good quality. So let's continue with Dum Dum.
Some of you have mentioned that less interim committee meetings concern you because interim committees do important work concerning the most complex legislative issues. And interim committee meetings are one of the best opportunities for citizens to participate directly in the process.
Okay,
you are not wrong. The issue is whether interim committee work is still a wise spend of the state's money. When this year, the committee bills that the interim committee worked on all summer were not prioritized by leadership in the House of Representatives, and therefore less than half of them passed into law. In comparison, over the past 25 years, around 65% of committee bills became law.
Okay, stop right there.
It has been mentioned several times.
Okay, one of the biggest reason why 65% of the committee bills passed into law, as Dum Dum says, is you had one party continually, or one faction rather, the Redcoats, continually in power for forever. I mean, this is the first time that conservatives have actually been in charge of at least one half of our legislature. And so the reason why those committee bills passed into law is the very people that were crafting the bills were the ones that were pushing them through the legislature. And there was nothing that conservatives could do about it. So again, just because a committee bill put something out doesn't mean that it's good legislation. It doesn't mean that it's needed. And it doesn't mean that it's the role of government.
Yeah, there's another cry that's coming out now. Now they have coined this phrase block voting.
Oh,
and they are upset because the right is voting in a block, oblivious to how they voted before. And to my knowledge, you've only got about 3 options for a vote, either yay or nay or conflicted.
Yeah. And it's, you mentioned just a little bit ago that a lot of the votes end up being 26, 36, 29, whatever. I mean, it's consistent. Now, during the last budget session, you could predict what the vote was going to be, and it was always 26, 36, 26, 36, 26, 36. So who is voting in a block and who is not? And it just so happens that folks who are ideologically aligned are probably going to end up voting together. And I mean, it's just a stupid argument. And again, it's taking that grain of truth and contorting it to fit your narrative. When the truth is, if you look at the graph that Evidence-Based Wyoming put out last year, and what they do is they take all of the votes, and the only thing they do is say, how often did you vote with the Republicans? How often did you vote with the Democrats? And then you use that data. Well, if you look at the graph, up in the right-hand corner, you have this little blob of blue dots. That was all of the Redcoats. And then stretched across the rest of the graph, and I should have got one ready for the program, but that's okay. Stretch across the whole graph is a line of red dots. Those represent the conservatives. So again, who is voting in a block against whom? Let's listen to a little bit more.
That an ideological shift in the legislature was responsible for the lack of priority given to committee bills this session. That is an accurate statement, and one you and I have discussed at length over the past few years. When we consider the principles, ethics, and faith that form our ideology, it is evident that there certainly has been a shift this year. Past Wyoming legislatures have been pretty far-sighted, legislating with the future generations in mind. Think about the past Wyoming policymakers who established the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund that now provides 30% of Wyoming's income. Consider the public school system that the majority of us benefited from. Or how about the Hathaway Scholarship Program? Past legislatures also crafted policy that spares our generation from paying an income tax.
Okay, so stop. So all of those things that he just mentioned are, arguably in the Constitution, in the Wyoming Constitution. Education, I can give you the history behind that. It was a response to the view that most people in the country had to the territory of Wyoming. That's what it was, but it's in the Constitution. So those are the thing. That's one of the things that the legislature has to deal with. Now, the question of how we deal with it is another matter, but yeah, you have to fund the education system. You have to deal with taxes one way or another. Now, there's a big question as to whether or not, and he's going to go on here in just a minute, and he's going to talk about all the things we didn't fund. Well, when you deal with taxes, the question is, what do you use those taxes for? And any conservative should be able to tell you that if you are taking in any more money than what is absolutely necessary to meet the obligations that are enumerated in the Constitution is legalized theft. And we have been stealing from Wyoming citizens for a really long time. That's why we have $30 billion in a sovereign trust fund. Over the past few legislative sessions, we put into the bank, over $1.7 billion. But we can't seem to bring ourselves to give any of that money back to Wyoming citizens. We just take and take and take, and we don't even look at if we actually need that big lump of money. And when we've spent everything that isn't nailed down and we still have money left over, well, then we don't consider that maybe we're taxing too much. We instead put that into a big giant fund that is now over $30 billion.
They keep touting the idea, okay, we've kept us from having an income tax. And when we start talking about reducing property taxes, they say, well, that'll force us to do an income tax. Sitting on $30 billion. And we keep saying what we need to do is cut the spending.
Yes, it is the spending. And that's where I'm going next. Go ahead and play Dum Dum.
But there is a new class of legislator associated with this ideological shift who do not share that vision. Many of the discussions we had this year make it clear that the focus of the Wyoming House of Representatives is no longer fixed on the upcoming generation. This past session...
Can't take it, can you?
I can't stand that. That is such a... What about abortion?
Yeah.
And the upcoming generation? What about property taxes, which property is where America's wealth is, and we leave that to our children? We are thinking of them. What about education, which has been relegated to a completely worthless Department of Education, not only federally, but here in the state? That's what we care about. We care about what the people of Wyoming care about, and not your silly ass benefits.
Woo! Play some more.
A majority of the House voted to not support rural health care, to not support mental health, to not support adult protective services, to not support the elderly, and to not support hungry kids. The state cannot be everything to everybody.
Okay,
but there was a time before.
Hold on. So this is the list that I was talking about. So all of those things that he just mentioned, rural health care, mental health, I'm assuming he meant in schools, adult daycare, whatever that is, or supporting hungry kids. So this is a common tactic of the Wyoming left and the left as a whole, that you take something that has a grain of truth in, that we don't support rural health care. Well, that's a false premise. You're assuming that supporting hospitals is the role of government. And that is something that the left has been trying to do for a really long time. Look at Obamacare.
I was just going to say.
Yep. Okay. So this has been a darling of the left. And if you look back to, there's this great book called The Road We Are Traveling, and you will have a really hard time finding it. And if you do find a copy of it on eBay, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. Now, it was written by this guy named Stuart Chase. Stuart Chase was a good friend of FDR. And in fact, this whole book lists the 10 things you have to do to create socialism in the country. Now, at the time, Stuart Chase didn't know what socialism was. Okay, he called it System X. But in those 10 things, and by the way, it was Stuart Chase that coined the phrase the New Deal. So all of those big spending government programs really wasn't FDR. It was Chase that was trying to figure it out. And one of those is that you have to control healthcare, because that is the most personal thing to a person. I mean, you got to have a doctor. And if you can control that, you can control anything. I mean, think about it, right? Like in my position, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have to go to the doctor. Well, if the government is in control of, what medicines I have, what doctors I can go see, well, they can pretty much control everything I want. I mean, it's going to get to a point where I have to do that, or, I don't live. And so if you can control healthcare, you can control anything.
So apply that to the Chinese. Not only are we ceding control of our healthcare to the government is selling out to antibiotics, to everything else that we need for healthcare, to our number one enemy. Mm-hmm. That is obviously the perfect way to fail.
Oh yeah, it makes you kind of wonder if this is sort of the plan, right? So the next thing, mental health care, and of course, I'm assuming he's referring to the 988 hotline. But let's talk about that. So conservatives took a lot of flack the last couple of sessions for not wanting to fund a trust fund to support this 988 calling system. You know why? Because we already have one. It's a national 988 hotline. And even before that law was passed in Wyoming, anyone could call 988 and talk to a mental health person, and get some help if they wanted to harm themselves. That was nothing was preventing you from doing that. But the bill to create a Wyoming version, and this is how stupid this is, right? If somebody in Minnesota came up with a cure from cancer, liberals like Dumb Williams would say, oh, we can't have any of that Minnesota cure. We have to have our own Wyoming cure.
Yeah, he's not a fourth generation Wyoming native. He can't talk you out of suicide.
Yeah, exactly right. So, the point is that 988 hotline was completely extraneous. We didn't need it. We didn't need our own call center. There was a national one. And so, but that narrative, or the narrative that was crafted after that is, we hate people and want them to kill themselves. I mean, that's exactly his point. What about adults? So he's pretty much covering the whole gamut here, right? Adult services. Okay, so explain to me why that is the role of government. I mean, explain anywhere in the Constitution, our Constitution, where we have to take care of old people. That is the job of your family. And if you took personal responsibility, you would have planned for that. I understand that there are people that, can't afford that, but we have mechanisms in place. It is not the role of the Wyoming legislature to provide adult daycare or hungry kids. Here is another one that I absolutely love, that we have to make sure that these kids are fed all the time. All right. So again, explain to me why this is the role of government. Where do you find it in the Wyoming Constitution? It's not in the good and plenty clause, I guarantee you. So the point, Dumb's point here is that, if you're unwilling to fund all of these superficial programs to education and make sure that we feed everybody, that, we somehow don't like kids. But you'll notice how the narrative gets twisted. That, yes, it's true that a lot of conservatives don't believe in all this crazy government spending to where we're giving you lunch even in the summer, because that's not the role of government. But you see how the narrative gets twisted, how they take one single grain of truth and they twist it to fit their narrative. Well, the problem is, like Ronald Reagan said, is the problem with our liberal friends is they know so much that isn't so. In other words, Dumb is making a bunch of claims about the Constitution that, frankly, don't exist. Now, when we come back from the break, we're going to continue with this stupid video. And so far, I'm doing all right. My head is still intact, but the best is yet to come from this guy. Oh, man, he irritates me.
Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice, documented to be way more right than dumb J.D. Williams. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Before the break, we were going through this most recent video put out by House District 2 Representative J.D. Williams, who has, and I call him dumb, but the reason for that, and I should probably explain, how I first met dumb Williams. Well, I already explained, up in the legislature, but shortly thereafter, I got an invitation to go speak over in Newcastle. And he sat right in the front row, right in front of me. And I let him have it for every single bad vote he made. And the whole time he just stood there and smiled. And, I often have two thoughts about people that just continually smile at me. Either A, they think I'm incredibly attractive and they just can't help themselves but smile, or B, they just can't help themselves because that's the only thing they know, because they have no idea what's going on, which is the case with J.D. Williams. So go ahead and play the next little bit of it.
For this ideological shift, when we were willing to do what we could where we could. Of course, much of this shift has come from out of state. We are presently blessed with many policymakers who have moved here and are now telling us how we've been doing it wrong all this time.
All right, stop.
Some of us who have been here for
All right. All of these people that move here from out of state. Again, go back to what I said earlier. There's a lot of people in the Wyoming legislature, like dumb Williams, that if somebody in, say, Illinois came up with a cure for cancer, he would say, we don't need any of that Illinois liberalism. We need our own cure for cancer. That's the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. Now, the reason that I know that a lot of the issues that were brought up during the Wyoming legislature were absolutely concerns of Wyoming citizens is I kind of know that there was some polling done ahead of time. Lots and lots of polling. And the Wyoming Freedom Caucus's 5 and Dime plan is the result of the top 5 issues that came out of that polling. And so to claim that these are just out of state ideas and this is not a Wyoming problem, that's bullcrap. We absolutely do have an issue with Title IX in schools. We do have an issue with men trying to participate in women's activities. There's a guy down at the university right now that's a member of a female sorority. There's a big lawsuit about it, and apparently he's trying to sue our friend Cassie Craven because, he thinks he can be a woman, and so why shouldn't we allow him in the sorority? That we do have a problem with immigration. There was a guy in Jackson that was just popped for his 11th time, being 11 times he's been arrested for being an illegal immigrant, illegal alien. Don't tell me that we don't have a problem with illegal aliens in this state. We absolutely do. And yet it was the very liberal Wyoming Senate that killed Senate File 124, which absolutely would have made it, easier for Wyoming law enforcement to tackle this illegal alien problem. So when Dum Dum Williams says, "Oh, this is just all these things from out of state," that's an attempt to deflect from what the real issues are. And it's don't be fooled by it, because when you look at all of those things, the What is a Woman Act, illegal immigration, Gordon's climate agenda. There was another bill that the Senate killed that would have classified CO2 as a positive emission. That it would have said it is not a pollutant. Absolutely on the minds of Wyoming citizens. So there's a ton of things that came up in conservative legislation. Oh, election integrity. How could I forget about that one? That is absolutely on the mind of Wyoming citizens, and it became clear in the polling. It is to assert that all of these things are just coming from out of state is complete and total bull crap. Now, at the risk of going a little bit long, let's go ahead and play the rest of this.
Generation or 2 or 6 aren't really interested in shifting. We are Wyoming.
We are Wyoming because he's a 6th-generation Wyomingite. That is the dumbest thing that I have ever heard. Just because your family has lived here for a heck of a long time, that doesn't tell me one thing about you, except, of course, that your ancestors had some pretty good taste. But it doesn't tell me anything about you. It's just geography. And if you paid attention to how your ancestors lived in Wyoming for 6 generations, maybe you should know that it is not the role of government to handle everything in your life.
Steve Johnson and I have an op-ed coming out that talks about 4th, 5th generation Wyoming native stuff. One of the comments in there I've made on this show, one's not responsible for with whom one's ancestors slept.
Exactly right. Now, I could make the claim that I am a son of the American Revolution, which I absolutely am. Now, I haven't paid the dues to join that organization, but my ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War. But what does that tell you about me? Nothing. Not a darn thing. It says that I've got a pretty good lineage, but this isn't England. We don't operate on the divine right of kings. It doesn't matter who your ancestors are, J.D. Williams, because I'm pretty sure if they took 3 looks at you, they'd find you to be a big, giant disappointment because you vote for everything that is completely opposite of the Wyoming ethic. This is the guy that talks about the code of the West all this time. But he is also the same guy that votes for bigger government, more spending, more control over your daily life, and less individual freedom. This is I didn't know this sort of thing existed until I got involved in the Wyoming legislature, but he is a big government wannabe cowboy. The reason I say wannabe cowboy is not that he doesn't own a ranch and not that he doesn't ride a horse, is because that most people that do that understand the importance of personal responsibility and relying on yourself. And that is the Wyoming ethic, my friends. One of the reasons we all live here is because it's a beautiful place, but that we get to be left alone. That this is a big state and you can move to a place where you're free, pretty free, from the encumbrances of government, that you could rely on yourself, that you can run your own ranch. You can still go out and buy a chunk of property out in the middle of the sagebrush if you want to and do whatever you want with it. The reason why people move here is they think that we have a smaller government and that we're going to stay the heck out of your life. Well, we could if we stopped electing people like J.D. Williams. This guy is an embarrassment to Wyoming. And the reason I say that is I have watched him vote for bigger government, more spending, against personal responsibility, against liberty. If there is a liberal vote, this guy is siding with it. And we have to get back and I know I'm fired up this morning because I have been watching bull crap come across my computer for the last 24 hours. More than that. But I mean, it just all came to a head last night. And then when I saw this dumb video by J.D. Williams, I just blew my cork. And it is for absolutely good reason. My friends, you should be as outraged as I am about the crap that is being put out. And more importantly, that you are being led to believe that is absolutely true. And there are so many things in that video that maybe have a grain of truth, but he's not giving you the full story. He's not saying that what happens when we start paying for, where we have the entire state paying for a healthcare system. What happens? Well, we have to have more government spending, which means higher taxes. He doesn't talk about how Wyoming families have the bejesus taxed out of them, and some of them have to sell their homes to pay the government their taxes so that they can stay in them. He's not telling you that many counties in Wyoming saw an over 100% increase in their property taxes. He's not explaining how that maybe, just maybe, we don't need to tax $1.7 billion over and above our wildest spending dreams so that we could throw it in the bank. He's not even talking about that, nor is he talking about our education system, which fails Wyoming students. The truth is, we spend almost more money than any other state in the entire country, and our test scores are pretty well mediocre because we're not teaching our students. The court ruling that just came out, the judge said, oh, well, the reason you're not funding education properly is you're not buying computers and school resource officers and buying them lunch. That doesn't have anything to do with education. So when Dum Dum starts to address those issues that really are a problem in Wyoming, when he starts voting for less government, for less spending, for less, for more personal responsibility and more liberty, then maybe I'll start to think about him seriously. But for right now, Dum Dum, if you're listening, and I really hope you are, why don't you come on Cowboy State Politics? I'll absolutely give you a fair interview. I have everybody else. If Gail Simmons can come on Cowboy State Politics, I'm pretty sure that you can do it. There's an open invitation, my friend. I'll give you as much. I'll give you the whole program. I'll double the size of the program. All you have to do is come on and debate with me, and let's talk about what the cowboy ethic and the code of the West really means to Wyoming citizens, because you, my friend, are voting to take it away. Well, that'll about do it for today's installment of the program. I'm David Iverson. Fired up. We'll see you tomorrow. Open Line Friday.